extra, right? So we can still chit-chat a little if you want. But while I was thinking of it,
Oh, good.
when I say gamzu,
Gamzu.
means gam is also, right, which is going to look like this in the Hebrew, right? Gimel and a mem with the kamats. And then zu is going to be, oh, okay, I got to keep it consistent here. I was just about to write in the Hebrew up here. This is the English. All right. And then we get zu, that's a vav, and that's a zayin, right? So this is gamzu, and then the rest of the phrase is le tovah, but you'll often hear me say le toiva. That's a Ashkenazi accent, I think. It's not really the right way to say it, but it's just a habit I picked up. So
This good tov.
Tovah.
Yeah.
So this is for the good. That's what.
Yeah, that was good. Mm-hmm.
So for, that's the prefix, right? The lamed, le, and then the word tov is good. Tovah is the feminine of good. So for good, right? So this also for good. That's what that, we named our one cat Gamzu after that. So if you look, and I'll pull that up here for you. Romans 8:28. You see this verse? I'll put it there so it's a little easier to read. So, and we know that all things work together for good.
Amen.
To them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. So that's Gamzu Latova, or Gamzu Latova, excuse me.
Gamzu Latova.
Yeah, Tovah is the correct way to say it. I've picked up the habit of saying Toiva because that's sort of an Ashkenazi Yiddish. I don't know what it is, but it's not really correct, but it's out there.
Which is proper Yiddish, please.
So I got used to saying Toiva, but it's Tovah. And the thing is, when you're conjugating these words, like Tov is masculine, that's good, right? Tovah is feminine, that's also good. So there's a masculine and feminine, and words like good, they actually have a masculine and feminine. So you don't see these very often, but once in a while, you'll see the plural. So you'll get Tovot or Tovim, right? But most often you'll see these two, the singular, Tov and Tovah. Now, where you might have seen that is in Rosh Hashanah, when somebody says Shanah, which is year, right? And then the greeting around Rosh Hashanah is Shana Tovah.
Shana Tovah.
Which is a good year, right? No, it's not Shana Tov. I mean, they would understand what you mean if you said that, but you would be, I don't know, perhaps like the person who says whom instead of who, or who instead of whom, or something along those lines, where it's not quite correct grammar. They'd still know what you mean, but typically you want the feminine word Shana to match up with the feminine word Tovah. So this is one of the things in Hebrew that it actually changes. So when you're matching these things up, it's you kind of have a double check system, is what I like to call it. But what I wanted to show you is the basic forms of how to conjugate. So this comes up a lot, and like I said, the best way to learn it is to start interacting with Scripture, and that's the 100% correct method to do it, because regardless of what we do in modern Hebrew or in other ways, the Scripture is the source of the Hebrew. And like, for instance, here's something you'll learn if you do go to study modern Hebrew. And now I'm writing it with the English phonetics to start with, but this is Ivrit. That's supposed to be an I.
I love Hebrew.
So ani lomed Ivrit. I study Hebrew. That's what that means. Ivrit is Hebrew. And if you remember when I was talking about it one time, I said that Eber, who's in the lineage, he's the fourth generation from Shem to Abram. And this is actually, in the Hebrew, looks more like this. Eber is, I think it's like this. Iver, or you see it conjugated sometimes, Ivri. And that's where you get your Ivrit, or your Hebrew. The word for Hebrew in Hebrew is Ivrit, Hebrew. Right? And I one time I covered how it says Abram the Hebrew, and it connects him into Eber, because Eber means Hebrew. It's the same word. And it says in Genesis there that whenever the flood came and the earth was divided at the Tower of Babel, it says it was in the days of one of Eber's son, one of his sons, Peleg, which means to divide. So if you piece it together by doing a little investigation there in the Hebrew, what you'll find out is you can know when the Tower of Babel happened was in the 5th generation between Shem and Abram. And because of the long lives of people in those days, Shem would have lived the whole way through those 10 generations. So Shem would have been there for the Tower of Babel. But so was Eber, and Eber outlived Shem eventually. And Eber became what I call the remnant, the inheritor of the Hebrew language, because when God separated the languages at the Tower of Babel, there was only a remnant of people that carried the Hebrew language, which was the original language of creation. And then when it identifies Abram in Genesis as Abram the Hebrew, and in Jewish tradition, Eber would have discipled Abram personally, because his lifespan was long enough that they overlapped by a few decades. And Eber would have discipled Abram and passed on the Hebrew language to Abram. Now, he wasn't the only one, obviously, but there was a remnant, this small group of people called the Hebrews that came through that branch, and then 70 worldwide languages that went all different directions. Anyway, this word lomed is to study, and this word ani is I. So if I say ani Benjamin, that's I am Benjamin. Ani lomed, I study. So I study Ivrit. But now here's how this changes. That's for masculine. So masculine is lomed, but feminine becomes lomedet, right?
So I would say lomedet.
And then the plural of masculine is lomdim and lomdot. Now the reason I'm showing you this is because it's good to learn to recognize the common ones. You'll see these endings. This is the feminine ending for singular, right? That's feminine singular ending. And you'll see that 1,000 times, different words. And the masculine, I'm not sure how to explain that, but it's usually the most basic form, right? So you get the basic masculine singular. Right, so there's 4 different forms basically, right?
So those change, like when you say Benjamin studies, it'd be Lomed, or if I say I study, it'd be in the feminine?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I'm getting at. So, and that goes along with, I don't know if this is even correct grammar in the Hebrew to say this, but I'm going to do it. If I say I study good, see, it sounds like incorrect grammar even in the English. But just for purposes of illustration, I have no idea whether that's correct grammar or not. I don't think it is. Anyway, Lomed Tov or Lomedet Tovah. You see how I'm saying the Tov changes,
All right.
right? So you get the masculine goes with the masculine, the feminine with the feminine. And likewise, if you had a plural, right, Tovim goes with Lomdim, which is the masculine plural. And then you get the masculine, or sorry, the feminine plural, Lomdot, and you get Tovot. And this is something that it's good to know, even if you don't have it completely mastered, it's good to know about it, because when you start interacting with the scripture and you see these different conjugations, it might throw you off a little. You're like, what is that word? Or why did Tov change to Tovah? Or why did Lomed change to Lomdim? Well, it's just the different forms. And if you remember, I said in Genesis 1:1, you have El is singular masculine, and Elohim is masculine plural. That Im is the masculine plural ending. You see how you have the Im, which in the Hebrew looks more like you'd usually have a Yod and a final Mem, right? And often you'd get this little Hirik, the Im, right? So that Im on the ending is a very common masculine plural ending.